He saw the sign at the last second. The headlights barely caught the rusted lettering through the thick Vermont fog. The Linwood Inn, an L-shaped relic crouched behind a curtain of black pine trees. The road narrowed like it wanted to push him back, but Evan's exhaustion outweighed his hesitation. 7 hours behind the wheel, his lower back screamed, his temples pulsed, and there hadn't been a single other hotel for miles. The parking lot was nearly swallowed by frost. Only one truck sat at the far corner, its bed full of snow and its tires sunken into slush like it hadn't moved in weeks. Evan left the engine running for a moment, staring at the building. No lights in the windows, no movement, just a flickering red vacancy sign glowing above the entrance. Something about the place. It didn't feel abandoned, but it didn't feel lived in either, like it was simply waiting. Inside, the warmth hit him like a wall. Not pleasant warmth, more like the stale breath of something old, trapped and fermenting in silence. The floor creaked beneath his boots. A dust-coated chandelier dangled crookedly from the ceiling. Wallpaper peeled like old skin along the corners, and a grandfather clock near the reception desk ticked out of sync with itself, skipping beats randomly. Behind the desk, a woman appeared. He hadn't seen her arrive. She just seemed to be there. Her hair was greying and tightly coiled into a bun, and she wore a crimson blazer with shoulder pads straight out of another era. Her smile was polite, yet hollow, like something she had practiced long ago and had forgotten how to stop. "Welcome to the Linwood," she said, her voice a smooth whisper. "Just the one night?" "Yeah, just me," Evan replied, unsure why that sentence made the back of his neck itch. She didn't ask for ID, no card, no computer, just a heavy brass key with 209 engraved into the head. As she handed it over, her fingers brushed his a little too long. "Don't open the door if someone knocks after midnight," she said lightly, as if commenting on the weather. Evan blinked. "What?" But she had already turned and vanished behind a curtain, leaving him standing alone in a lobby that suddenly felt colder. The second-floor hallway was dim, the overhead lights buzzing with a tired whine. The carpet had a strange dampness to it, like someone had recently spilled something and tried to blot it up. Unsuccessfully. As Evan walked toward his room, he noticed that the floor sloped slightly, making him feel off balance. Each room door he passed had peeling gold numbers and dust in the creases of the hinges, yet everything was too quiet. No televisions, no murmured conversations behind doors, just silence and that humming light. Room 209 opened with a metallic clack. The room was, oddly, nicer than expected. Clean sheets, newish curtains, a simple dresser, a queen-size bed, and a wall-mounted mirror above the desk. But something felt wrong. The room had no personality, no warmth. The mirror, too, had a faint smear, what looked like a child's handprint, low and faded, like it had been there for years. Evan wiped it with a tissue. It didn't come off. Shrugging uneasily, he tried the TV. Just static. His phone? 0 bars. Even the Wi-Fi password didn't connect. Feeling increasingly isolated, he lay down, yet his skin itched with awareness. He felt like he wasn't alone. The chill came first, a slow, creeping cold that settled into the bones of the room, no matter how high he turned the thermostat. Evan stirred under the blanket, half asleep, disoriented. Then came the sound. Light, dragging footsteps in the hallway. He held his breath. It was nearly 1 a.m. The receptionist's voice echoed back in his mind. Don't open the door after midnight. He sat up. The footsteps stopped right at his door. He watched the doorknob. It twitched, just slightly. Evan whispered, "Who's there?" No reply, only silence. And then, a soft voice, impossibly close. "He's watching." The whisper came from inside the room. Evan spun toward the bathroom, where the door had slowly creaked open an inch. He forced himself up and flicked on the light. Empty, but steam clung to the mirror, and something was scrawled across it in streaks. "Stay with us." His heart pounded. He stumbled back to the bed and stayed awake until morning, too afraid to blink. By morning, the fear had become confusion. Evan headed to the breakfast room just past the lobby, expecting to find other guests. Instead, he found a single man seated by the window, staring at the snow-covered lot. He looked in his 50s, pale skin, yellowing nails, and deeply sunken eyes. His coffee was untouched. "You're in 209?" the man asked without looking away from the glass. Evan stopped mid-step. "Yeah. Why?" The man let out a small breath, like he had been waiting for this moment. "People don't usually stay more than one night in that room." Evan gave a nervous laugh, trying to lighten the mood. "Why not?" "They never feel rested. They hear things, see things. Some don't leave at all." The man finally looked at him, his eyes haunted. "A mother and son checked into 209 years ago, 1979. She was running from someone. They were found days later. The boy was dead. The woman was gone. But not in the way you'd think. Her clothes were still there. Her purse. No signs of struggle. It's like the room kept her." Evan swallowed hard. "Kept her?" The man nodded. "And now it's looking for someone new." Evan returned to 209, determined to pack up and leave before nightfall. But as he entered the room, the air felt denser, like the walls had closed in. He grabbed his bag from the closet. It was empty. Every item he had placed there the night before, gone, even his phone charger. He checked the drawers, empty. Panic prickled his spine. He tried the door, locked, but not by him. He hadn't turned the bolt. He twisted it violently, but it refused to budge. The window was sealed shut, thick with grime. Then came the sound again, this time from inside the room. A soft humming, a child's voice, singing something tuneless and slow. Evan turned to the mirror and saw a small figure standing behind him. A boy, no older than 10, pale and thin, wearing a sweater with a faded bear print. But when Evan spun around, no one, just air. That night, the walls began to breathe. Evan lay still, his ears straining. The drywall expanded and contracted like lungs, pushing the air with a low groan. The lights dimmed on their own, shadows shifting as if things moved just outside of vision. He covered his ears, but the whispers continued, inside his head. "She's here. You're next. We need you." The door creaked open slowly on its own. Beyond it, the hallway was pitch black, swallowing the light from the room. Evan stood up, his legs trembling, and peered out. The corridor no longer ended. It twisted, bent, forming corners that hadn't been there before. From its depths came the sound of a woman sobbing. He called out, "Hello?" But his voice was swallowed by the dark. The sobbing stopped, and then something ran at him. He slammed the door shut and shoved the dresser in front of it. Breathing hard, he turned, and the room had changed again. The furniture was rearranged. The mirror was now directly across from the bed, and in its reflection, He saw her, a woman, in a blood-stained red blazer standing behind him, her eyes wide and mouth silently screaming. He turned, no one. But when he looked back at the mirror, she was closer. He screamed and threw the mirror to the floor. It shattered, yet her reflection remained, frozen in the shards, pieces of her face looking up at him from all angles. He backed away and reached for his bag again. It was now full. All of his things were back, folded neatly, like someone had been caring for them. At dawn, the front door stood open, frost spilling into the lobby. Evan didn't ask questions, he just ran. He drove for hours before stopping at a gas station. When he checked his phone, there were no missed calls. But there was a single photo in his gallery he hadn't taken. Room 209, the bed made, the boy sitting on the edge, smiling, and behind him, Evan, looking straight at the camera. 3 days passed before anyone noticed Evan was missing. His car was later found parked neatly behind the Linwood Inn, keys still in the ignition, windshield frosted over from the inside. The front desk denied he ever checked in. "No one by that name," the woman said with a smile. Same red blazer, same frozen expression. "Are you sure he came here?" The police searched room 209. It was spotless. No signs of disturbance, no luggage, no fingerprints. Just an unusually cold draft and a mirror that seemed freshly cleaned. Too clean. Still, something about the room made even the officers uneasy. They didn't linger. Later that week, the receptionist dusted off a brass room key and returned it to the wall behind the desk. 209. That same night, a couple pulled into the parking lot during a snowstorm. Their GPS had failed. Cell reception was dead. The sign out front blinked faintly. Vacancy. Inside, the receptionist greeted them warmly. "Just one night?" The man smiled. "Yeah, just one night." She slid over the key. Room 209. It was supposed to be a brief stop, nothing more than a one-night stay before continuing their road trip north. Elliot and Marianne had been driving for 10 hours straight when they saw the faded billboard, the Larkspur Hotel. Since 1932, vacancy. It sat in the valley like an afterthought, hidden by overgrown trees and half-forgotten highways. The front of the hotel was striking, not for its beauty, but for its silence. No birds, no cars, not even wind. It was as if the building swallowed sound. "Maybe we should find something else," Marianne muttered. But Elliot was already opening the rusted door, which groaned like something old waking up. Inside, the air was stale but warm. Antique furniture filled the lobby. Dark leather chairs, a fireplace lined with ash, a grandfather clock with a cracked face ticking too slowly. Behind the desk stood a man in a grey suit, tall and oddly still, his face so pale it seemed powdered. His name tag simply read, Mr. Oldwin. "Welcome," he said softly, never blinking. "You've been expected." They were given room 304. "It's a quiet room," Oldwin said, placing the brass key on the counter with a soft clink. "No disturbances." He slid a dusty leather-bound guest book toward them. Elliot signed his name, hesitated, then asked, "How many people stay here these days?" Aldwin smiled without warmth. "Just enough." Room 304 was at the end of the hallway. The walk there felt longer than it should have. The carpet muffled their steps, and every sconce flickered slightly as they passed. When they entered the room, something felt off. The first thing Marianne noticed was the absence of a window. "That's not legal, is it?" she whispered. The walls were covered in patterned wallpaper that looked faded by decades, yet the air was cold, almost damp. They found no thermostat, no phone, no Bible in the drawer. Just a small note card placed neatly on the nightstand. "Please do not remove the key once entered." Marianne turned to Elliot. "What does that mean?" But he didn't answer. He was staring at the ceiling. A single water stain shaped like an open eye had formed above the bed. That night, the sounds began. It wasn't the occasional creak or moan of an old building settling. These were rhythmic, repeating, a dragging sound beneath the floorboards, a sharp click-click inside the walls, and a whisper, always too faint to understand, but unmistakably human. Elliot leaned close to the wall. "Do you hear that?" Marianne nodded. "It sounds like someone pacing." They pressed their ears to the paneling. The steps stopped instantly, as if the thing behind the wall had also been listening. Suddenly, the bathroom light flickered on. They hadn't touched it. Inside, the mirror was fogged over. Someone had written in the condensation, "It sees you now." By morning, they were exhausted. But instead of checking out, they found themselves exploring. The front desk was empty. The lobby seemed older somehow, like it had aged overnight. They decided to go floor by floor, searching for someone, anyone. That's when they noticed something strange. None of the other room doors had numbers, just carved symbols, strange loops, backward letters, marks like claws. They tried knocking, no answer. Elliot opened one of the doors a crack and instantly slammed it shut. Inside had been a room identical to theirs, down to the pattern of the bedspread, but completely filled with water. And floating in that water, motionless, had been a woman. Her eyes were wide open, her lips slightly parted, and yet she looked exactly like Marianne. They ran, but the hallway seemed longer now. There were too many turns, too many doors. At the far end of the 4th floor, they found a narrow staircase that led down, though they hadn't seen it on the building's layout. At the bottom was a metal door, unmarked, cold to the touch. When they opened it, they found rows of filing cabinets and faded photos pinned to corkboards. Hundreds of guests, some smiling, some expressionless, all in black and white. Some of the photos were very old, dated in the 1950s. Others were printed on glossy modern paper. In one photo, Elliot saw himself and Marianne standing at the reception desk, taken the night before. But in the picture, Aldwin's eyes were pitch black. Then they noticed a wall labelled "Departures." Every photo had one of 2 stamps, cleared or withheld. Their photo was still unstamped. Back in their room, the door was different. It was still numbered 304, but the doorknob had been replaced. It was now covered in thin black fabric, like it had been recently scorched. Elliot reached for it, but Marianne pulled him back. "Look at the floor." Under the door, a slow black liquid was seeping through, thick, tar-like. It moved like it was alive. They backed away. Then the closet door creaked open. Inside, there was now another door. Small, child-sized and wooden, with no knob, only a keyhole. Marianne whispered, "It wasn't there before." Elliot instinctively checked his pocket. The brass key was gone. The floor beneath them splintered. The bed vanished. The walls folded inward like paper. They were falling, sinking into a pitch-black void. When they woke, they were back in their room, but it wasn't room 304. This room had no number, no furniture, just walls that pulsed like lungs. A constant low moan vibrated through the floor. On one wall, a message had been scratched in what looked like fingernails. Time doesn't work here. No one ever saw Elliot and Marianne check out. Their car stayed in the lot until it was towed months later. Mr. Aldwin told police he had no record of their reservation, that the guest book had been missing for years. But sometimes, new guests report sounds in the walls of room 304. A man whispering for help, a woman crying softly. The closet door sometimes opens on its own, and once, a maintenance worker quit after seeing a second door inside the closet, a child-sized door with no knob, just a keyhole. David Mercer, 52, had been driving for 6 straight hours. The rain was relentless, hammering against the windshield as his wipers struggled to keep up. He'd taken a detour off Route 11 after a semi-truck jackknifed near the exit. His GPS rerouted him through a narrow, unfamiliar stretch of road winding through dense forest. There were no streetlights, no other cars, just miles of asphalt and trees bending in the wind like watching figures. By the time the low fuel warning lit up, he was already too deep in nowhere. The only sign of civilization was a faded roadside board. Ridgeway Inn, 2 miles. David squinted through the downpour. The sign was cracked, vines growing around its base, but it was the only hope he had of warmth and fuel. Against better judgment, and with a gnawing ache in his lower back, he turned toward it. The Ridgeway Inn sat on a hill surrounded by crooked trees, its shingles moss-covered, its windows dark. Only one porch light glowed weakly. David pulled in beside 2 other parked cars, both models he hadn't seen on the road in years. One looked like it hadn't moved in a decade. Inside, the reception area had an antique charm, faded wallpaper, a ticking grandfather clock, and a dusty chandelier overhead. Behind the desk stood a man in a beige vest and wire-framed glasses, thin-lipped and formal. "You're fortunate," the man said without looking up. "We have 1 room left, room 6, corner suite." "No ID, no forms?" David asked, wary. The man smiled stiffly. "It's Ridgeway policy. We believe in trust here." A shiver slid down David's spine. He nodded hesitantly and took the key. It was an old brass one, engraved, not electronic. Room 6 was oddly pristine compared to the rest of the inn. Spotless, with an untouched bedspread and an old rotary phone on the nightstand. A thick framed mirror faced the bed, and heavy drapes blocked out the storm outside. The room smelled faintly of lavender, and the air felt cooler than it should have been. As David set his bag down, he noticed something unsettling. There was no power outlet, no thermostat, no smoke detector. He reached for his phone to check the time. No signal, no Wi-Fi. Shrugging it off, he lay down, figuring he'd check out early and get back on the road at dawn. But as he drifted off, he thought he heard something. A faint click, like a door closing softly. David awoke at 3:12 a.m., cold and alert, as though something had touched his arm. The room was completely silent. No rain, no wind. Just an absence of noise so intense it pressed on his ears. Then came the whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. "Still here." He shot upright, eyes scanning the room. Nothing. He grabbed the phone, no dial tone. As he stood to check the door, he realized the mirror looked off. His reflection wasn't quite aligned. He moved left. His reflection didn't follow. For a few seconds, David stood frozen. Then, without warning, the mirror went black, pitch black, as if someone had pulled a curtain across the glass from inside. Determined to leave, David grabbed his bag and opened the door, but the hallway outside wasn't the same one he'd walked down earlier. The wallpaper was peeling, the carpet soaked through as if submerged. Lights above flickered and buzzed. He walked quickly toward the lobby, but the corridor looped. He passed room 6 again, then room 8, then room 6 a second time. He turned around. The hallway had changed again. No staircase, no lobby, only more numbered doors that didn't match the layout from before. "Help!" he yelled. "Anyone!" From behind one of the doors came a slow, rhythmic knocking. 3 knocks, then silence, then a voice, hoarse and desperate. "You need to leave, now." After what felt like hours, David found the lobby again, but it was different now. Dust was thicker, cobwebs stretched across the ceiling, and the desk was unattended. The bell didn't work. The grandfather clock now read 4:44 and ticked backwards. As he turned to leave, the innkeeper appeared. "You shouldn't have gone down the hallway," he said calmly. "The inn adjusts itself. It reacts to regret." David stared at him. "What the hell is this place?" The innkeeper adjusted his glasses. "Some people check in during a storm, some during a breakdown. Others, like you, are simply running from something. Ridgeway doesn't forget its guests, especially the ones who try to leave." The innkeeper led David to a door he hadn't seen before. Room 0. "Everyone has a room here," he said, unlocking it with a different key. "But the room chooses the guest." Inside, David saw images from his past, his ex-wife crying in their living room, a former client in a courtroom wrongly accused because David had buried a report to save the firm's reputation, a dark road, a hit and run he had pretended never happened. David collapsed to his knees. I never meant." The innkeeper crouched beside him. "Intent doesn't matter here, only memory." Back in the room, no longer room 6, but something darker, David sat on the edge of the bed staring at the mirror. His reflection didn't move at all now. "You can stay," the reflection said, lips not matching the words, "or give your place to another." "What does that mean?" David whispered. The phone rang. A voice on the line, his own voice, spoke calmly. "You know someone who deserved this more. You just have to bring them." David dropped the receiver. He understood now. That's how the other guests arrived. Someone always opened the door for the next. When the sun rose, the inn looked normal again. David was at the front desk. A car pulled into the lot. A young man, alone, stepping out, confused by the storm and the lack of cell signal. David smiled. "Welcome. You're lucky. We have 1 room left." He handed over the brass key. "Room 6. The innkeeper nodded at him from across the lobby, then faded into the hallway. David stayed behind the desk. He'd made his choice. The inn had let him out, only because someone else had checked in. And now, Ridgeway had its new guest.